All right. Hey everyone, welcome to Astral Projection Stories. Today I'm grateful to have the opportunity to interview Yesmar. I know him as Yesmar00, but it looks like your name is Joseph. Is that right?
It is.
Cool. Yeah, so I have Joseph. I met him on Reddit. I went ahead and put out a bat signal into Reddit to see if any astral projectors would be willing to interview. And luckily, before the post got taken down, Joseph said he's game. So, I'm grateful that he's here. So thank you, Joseph, for being here.
No
For
problem.
Is there anything you'd like to promote? Anything you'd like to say before we dive into you and your experiences?
Nah, I'm good.
All right, cool, man. So when did it all start for you?
See, that's a good question. Mm, so, are you just talking about projection or just being aware of something else kind of going on in the background?
I would say your first astral projection experience that
Okay.
you were like conscious of.
Okay. Yeah. So, this was in late 2022. So, half of 2021 and part of 2022, I got into the gateway experience. I found it got taken down now, unfortunately, but I found a Google Drive from someone in Reddit. I had heard about it, and I didn't know much about it, but it sounded interesting. The CIA was doing some really weird stuff, and like they're still doing weird stuff. But they of all the organizations, they kind of are open minded about a lot of different things. And I didn't feel like reading that whole document, so I was like, let me just get in this. And I started reading Robert Monroe's book as well. And after months of practice and ups and downs, I remember distinctly I decided to listen to. I've been practicing this lesson called Exploration Sleep in Wave One. It's supposed to be like the introduction to out of body experiences.
That's
And
separate from Robert Monroe's HemiSync program.
it's in the program, it's in
Oh,
Wave
okay,
One of the program, yeah.
okay.
And it's supposed to be the first introduction. And so I tried it countless times with no success. So one day I just turned on the tape and then just kind of let go, fell asleep. Then I woke up floating towards my door, my back door. The way my room was set up, um, across the wall from my bed was a door, two doors with windows on them. And I remember I just woke up and I was kind of floating and I was like, what's going on? And I was moving towards my door. I looked around and there's this dark bluish tint to the room and it was a little dark. It was very silent. And I was like, oh, I'm like out of my body. And it was interesting because I noticed, because I'd done so much studying on my own processes, I noticed my thoughts were like instant. Like there was no delay. It's very hard to describe. There was no delay. It was just everything. It's almost like, let's say you're telling someone a story and it takes 2 minutes. Imagine if that story just came out in a second. That's what it was. It was very instantaneous. And I
Wow.
had I had a simultaneous thought of like, oh, I'm projecting. Oh, this is pretty crazy. And I got to my door and I remember banging on it. But I didn't know how to, at the time, I didn't know how to move through solid objects. So I was like, let me just take this as a sign of not going any further because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just out here, So um, I banged on the door and I was like, okay, well, this is a projection. I'm happy. And then I told myself to go back to my body. Then I woke up and journaled. And then I emailed, I messaged. There's a guy named Rick who's like, I think he's a mod on the subreddit. He's been projecting for like 50 years. And we've actually become good friends over the last year or so. So I messaged him because when you have a projection for the first time, you almost always doubt its validity depending on what it is because you don't have any reference point, right? Like, I'm on Reddit a lot and I'm on there because I like to help new people because it's all the same questions being asked in different ways for the most part,
Yeah.
unless someone's sharing a story. And so I had to ask him like, hey, this is what happened. And previously I had deliberately journaled my dreams because that was the advice that was given to me. And then, you compared projection to a dream, even a lucid dream, is two completely different things. And so that was my very first experience. And then Yeah, so that was
Is
my
that
first one.
is that Rick from Astral Club, his YouTube channel?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's
I
so cool, man.
he
He's
is
such a
so
cool
cool.
guy.
I took him up on the him teaching me. I paid him like, I
Hmm.
don't know, $300 or $400, I can't remember,
Yeah.
and got to know him a little bit. And luckily, he came on. He was my first guest
Oh,
onto the
cool.
show, so
Oh
he did
yeah,
me a favor there. That was really nice. But
he's
that's
got
awesome how you reached
stories
out
for
to him.
days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found him through, he made that post on Reddit about like his projection going to like the White House and stuff like that. And this is when I was first exploring it because I was kind of in a weird place in my spiritual life. And I was like, this is interesting. So anyway, yeah, I got to know him. At first, I was like skeptical, but as I projected, I was like, oh, all the stuff he's saying is like legit. I just, from the perspective of someone who's never done it before, it seems fanciful until you do it. And you're like, oh yeah, at this point, anything's possible. So,
That's so cool, man.
yep,
So, what was your, so how old are you right now, if you don't mind me asking?
31.
So you're 31. Why 20, did you say 2021 or 2022 is when you dove into it? Why,
2021.
like, why now, you know?
Yeah, so from 2011 up until like 2020, I was a pretty devout Christian. Now, I wasn't like hardcore because every day in the back of my mind, I always had a hard time with seeing things in black and white. Like an in group versus an out group, like you're saved, you're not saved. I was always that messed with me. And so over time, I ended up leaving church for a lot of reasons. And I found myself in this vague space. Like I knew there was something out there because I think that the world religions try to make attempts at explaining the non physical spaces, but they oftentimes do that through a very heavy filter with a lot of dogma and rules and stuff
Yeah,
like
I
that.
think you're right. Yeah.
And I've had experiences personally before that and stuff that's going on with my family that's always had something in the back of my mind. Like there's something going on. Like my grandma, for example, she passed last year. She was old,
Sorry to
lived
hear
a
that.
long life. No, she was like 95. She lived a really long life.
Good. Nice.
And I remember, and this is something I thought was normal until a couple of years ago. I was like, hold on, that's not normal. She would tell me about these dreams she would have. And this is just one of the many things. She was a deeply Christian woman, but every single sibling she had and child she had, including my dad and my aunt, before they passed away, she'd always have a dream about being with them. And in the dream, she'd talk to them, they'd be in a certain scenario, and she would feel like this was her last time speaking with this person. And every single time she had that dream, the next day she would find out that they like died. And she
Whoa.
would tell me these stories. I remember one day I was like, Grandma, can you tell me more about this? And then she told me, and I was like, hold on, this isn't normal. I just grew up. My grandma was a very deeply intuitive woman, very deeply intuitive. In her mind, the things she experienced with God was God, speaking to her. My belief is that she was just a deeply spiritually gifted and in tune person with like her intuition. Like her stuff was sharp. There was no real blockage with her and what's going on. And so yeah, so I was in this space in my life where I didn't really know what was going on. So I found the gateway experience, like I said, and I was just curious. I'm a curious person. And when I started reading Robert Monroe's book, I remember reading a phrase that he wrote, and this is something I tell people. He said, once you open this door, you can't close it. Like once you project, you can't just okay, I'm done. Like it's your human curiosity is gonna want to like know more and more, and you're gonna get to points where you just project like randomly. I was talking to someone on Reddit a couple of days ago. I was trying to help her out, and then she ended up having a random projection yesterday, and she was like, "What do I do?" I was like, "Look, once you open it, like you'll just lay your head down and boom, you just got to do it. You got to like just go with the flow." So it was a combination of me leaving the church, understanding there's something else out there, and then I just happened to find projection, and then once I projected, it was a wrap from there. I was like, "Oh, I got to keep doing this. This is crazy."
That's awesome, man. I love it. That's awesome, dude. Um, Before we get into your experiences, your practice, you said you practiced hard for, did you say practice? I don't know if you said hard or not, but you practiced for 2 months or so before you
Yeah, it
successfully.
was. I have to go in my notes, but I would say mid to late 2021 or late 2020. I was just doing some experimental stuff, just listening to like some of the tapes. I would say I practiced for I would say like 2 months of listening to Exploration Sleep before I finally had a projection. And then I had another projection, which was even more interesting with the gateway experience.
So really quick, I'm familiar with the tapes, and you have like wave one, whatever,
Yeah,
then wave two or wave one dash two, whatever.
yeah,
So you started with the first one, which goes for about 40 minutes or something like that.
yeah. So I started with the very first one, the introduction, because I wasn't used to like meditating. I wasn't used to because once I found out I got to lay back and close my eyes and not fall asleep for 40 minutes, that took me like a couple weeks of just practicing not falling asleep. And
Yeah.
then I did it once I got what was told to me was think of it more of like an encyclopedia. Like you learn the focus levels like focus 10 and you just practice it until you can do the whole process without him like helping you. Because once you move on in the series, he's not going to give you instructions. He's just going to say move into your preparatory process, and then you hear some waves, and then he's like, "I'll meet you when you get to this level." So I practiced that the focus 10 until I really got it down, and I could just do it without him giving me instruction. And then I got to exploration sleep, and I realized this was the introduction to out of body experiences. And that took me a couple months because the time. It's only 40 minutes. I realized over time that it took me longer to get to that state than what the audio had. The audio had I would say 25, 30 minutes in was the portion where you were technically supposed to be like out of body. But for me, I was like, I can't fit my personal mental schedule in that time frame. So I found out over time that if I just let the tape run and end and I just stay there, then I'll have some time to actually start projecting. Because for me, I couldn't do it in that time frame. I had to learn this over time. It took me,
Oh,
like I said, a couple
interesting.
months. And then once I had my first two projections, like I said, I had my first one, and I think I had some between that, and then I had the second one. And after the second one, because of some things that happened during the second one, I was like, okay, this is interesting. I realized that I wanted to project without any kind of help at all. And that took me a few more months because I had to you know, projecting with an audio and no audio, in my opinion, are two very different things.
Why?
For me personally, I think having audio is great, but I think I didn't want to rely on it. And I realized, especially comparing those two, is that when I didn't use any sounds, I slowly learned and understood my own personal process to leave. And for me, I needed to not have sound because I needed to feel the sensations. I need to hear the sounds. I needed to like really connect with what my mind was going through as I turned my awareness to a different direction. And I noticed that with the tapes, it was great. But when I did it myself, I learned so much more about myself, my own process. And it took longer, but I think it was worth it because I don't feel the need to rely on anything. That's how I am.
I can relate. Yeah.
So
Yep.
and then I had a lot of fear to deal with, and so not having any help was really helpful for that because it just needed me and my fear and me and whatever's out there. And so personally for me, I felt that I needed to, and like my intuition was saying, hey, do this without these and just go on your own journey. And that's kind of where I went. And I never finished the series, but it was helpful. It was really helpful for me for those first few projections.
Congratulations on being able to learn how to do it without the tapes, and now you can do it. So good for you, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, it took a
Um,
lot of time, but yeah, I got there.
Good for you, dude. That's awesome. And then to speak on fear really quick, would you say that your fear is conquered 100% at this point? Do you still have fear things that you're working with on?
I would say not 100%. I think we're always dealing with a little bit. Even the people who are projecting for a while, like Rick, I know, doesn't deal with fear in the same way a young projector does, but he still has certain things that, a little spooky, but it's not crazy. As far as the stuff I was afraid of, yeah, pretty much, that's pretty much done, taken care of.
Wow.
Um, because there's a lot of the stuff I was afraid of, a lot of people are afraid of. Like all the fear stuff on Reddit, it's the same thing. It's a combination of misinformation, the combination of like the religious background a lot of people have, media, movies, stuff people read on Reddit. It's almost always people that have never really had their own experiences projecting their fears based on other people's experiences. Oh, I heard this. Oh, I heard there's
Yeah.
these entities in your room. Entity. It's
Yeah.
just you just scare yourself. And for me, once I got through that, my projection got a lot more frequent. I'm trying to get them back frequent now, but it was I felt so much more free, because I vanquished that dragon, which is the very very big dragon, and it's tough for a lot of people. But yeah, I would say it's gone. All the stuff I was afraid of, I'm not really concerned anymore about all that stuff.
Oh yeah, man, that's awesome. Would you did it take you confronting those fears within your projections to conquer them, or was it a combination of outside and in?
I like the phrase "as above, so below." I think all this stuff, the same person you are in your waking life, you carry over to your non-physical life, whether it's dream or projection. And so the things that you fear in projections, those are things you fear in real life. You just don't face them because you're not, walking around in real life, at least consciously, interacting with different levels of reality. So I think for me, it was projection based. Like I hated projecting at night, so I forced myself to project at night.
Oh, nice.
I know this is I always felt like there were some entities, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna go. I'm just gonna, I remember talking to Rick once, and I was like, Rick, I'm having a hard time, and I told him I was like, man, I had this experience, and he was like, well, if you don't feel comfortable at night, just do it in the morning. I was like, you know what? No. So, uh, and at this time, my projection shifted from being morning to night, and I just had to deal with it, man. It was tough, but a lot of it was just fear of the unknown, really.
Yeah.
It's when you're dealing with a different level of reality, it's a different type of feeling, because you're diving in the deep end in a lot of ways, and because you're now focused in a level or levels of reality that you are not familiar with at all. It's like throwing a dolphin in space or something like that. Literally, like it's just completely different. And
Yeah.
so once I got over the fear of the unknown, and I really, because I'm an adventurous person, I just had to embrace that adventurous spirit. It was
Oh yeah,
on from
you
there.
sound like it for sure, man. You sound
Yeah, man,
brave too and
it
courageous, and
was,
you're just like
yeah,
you'll face
man.
it head on
Because my
to figure it out.
projections, it's funny. Everyone's different. So most people, when they project, they find themselves in their room and they fly around their city. That was never me. To this day, I find myself in my room, but once I move through my wall or any opening, I'm somewhere else. I found myself, I quickly realized that every time I leave my house, I'm in a different type of reality. Usually I find myself in what I call of like parallel versions of Earth. I think there's an infinite amount of them, but I found myself, I leave, like, for example, this was a week ago, a couple weeks ago. I had a projection for the first time in like a month or so. And I remember I my exit technique has changed because I've had some difficulty. And so I just had this random thought once to just this is to spin around. So when I felt like I was ready to leave, I acted like I was running around my walls, back and forth and faster and faster and faster. And all of a sudden I popped out of my body, but I didn't end up in my room. I ended up I can only describe this to be it looked like space, outer space. And in front of me were maybe 15 to 20 what I would consider wormholes. It looked like I could see the light bending in them, and they were kind of dotted everywhere. And so my intuition was like, pick one. So I just flew into one, and then I popped out somewhere else, and I just found another one, and I do certain things to deal with my fear. I see some that are like light, and I see one at the bottom corner that's really dark. I was like, I'm going there because I had a fear, and I recognized that it wasn't anything legitimate, so I just went for it. And I went in there, and I popped up in this coffee stand. It was weird. I moved up, and then I popped up in this looked like a tiny little coffee stand built for one person, and this lady was making coffee, and I was like looking around, I was like, where am I? And I popped out, and I just started flying around, and unfortunately I forgot a lot of it because I had an extended like double or triple false awakening dream afterwards, which messed me up. But I found myself in another level of reality, and I'm so used to it now that I'm taking up and I'm trying to study these variations because I'm just interested in how things are different. Because I've been to some places that look like here, but the customs are so foreign. It's just intriguing to me. It's hard to describe.
Where do you
So yeah.
think you were once you roamed around a little bit around that coffee stand? Where would your guess be on in
Oh,
planet Earth?
I have no idea. I
Yeah,
just
okay.
know because when you go somewhere, you have an immediate idea of how different it is. Obviously, from what you see, but when you're projecting I think that when we're walking around doing our thing, we are all experiencing our life firstly through psychic means and secondly through physical means. And so I think that every interaction we have, every connection we have is first psychic, then physical. I think there's a reason why when we have a feeling about a friend, they call us. I think that's just the natural conscious connection that we have. We just don't engage with it. We think, oh, that's coincidence. Now, how many coincidences have to happen for you to be like something's going on?
Yeah.
So I think intuition is very real, but when you're projecting, it's heightened because you're just pure energy. So it's easy to feel your environment, you know? So I just learned to pick up how to feel it. And it just depends, man. I don't really think about where it is I'm on Earth. I just know that this is not the same Earth that I know.
Yeah.
And given where I am, I have an idea of how far divorced I am from my home, what I call my home station. Some places I've gone to are pretty normal. Other places I've gone to look normal, but you can tell it's not the same thing. Architecture is different. The architecture went a different way. The direction went a different way.
Oh yeah.
Social customs are different. The way people act are different. It's very
Yeah.
hard to describe, but it's so unique to me, which is why I like
That's
it. I
so
like the
interesting.
randomness. It's very, very interesting. Yeah.
Super interesting. Yeah, one thing that I'm always curious about and will pop up in my mind from time to time is the idea of, okay, say somebody decided never to do that one thing that they were thinking of school, go that route, or I don't know, whatever it
Yeah.
is, a girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever.
Hmm.
How does that butterfly effect unfold, and then what did that reach to create such a different world? And that's exactly what you're saying. I think is you're entering these worlds
Yeah.
where decisions were different, and then you have a cascade effect of
Yeah.
and a result that you're seeing that's completely different. It's so
Yeah.
interesting,
I
dude.
think that every single possible, probable moment of every single second is a I think what we're in right now is what's called a probable system of reality. So I think that think about this. Imagine that this reality is one point on a string, and there are endless strings in various positions. There are purple strings, yellow strings, big strings, thick strings, infinitely. So I think that every decision we make, there is a part of us that's it's connected to our personality and our soul that has gone a different route. And these are not just like you and I aren't the originators. It's just how it's been. These series of moments that your mind is aware of, the illusion of time passing. This is just the collection of probable decisions you've made in this timeline. And there are other not only versions of you that look like you, but other versions of you in different realities that could be a man, a woman, a child. Like your girlfriend could have been your mother in a past life, or could have been your brother in a. You see,
Yeah,
it's
so
it's
freaking
it's
interesting.
weird. It's very it's since I learned projecting, my whole viewpoint's been it's crazy. It's hard to describe to people. Like when I give people advice, I have to understand that like, if you've never projected, it's very difficult to describe how I think things operate. But yeah, that's another fascinating point too. It's interesting.
I I have I feel like we could do this for a long time. So I have one more like super, in my opinion, super deep question that
Yeah.
relates to all this before we hop into your experiences,
Hmm.
adventures. Um, so this one I threw at Rick, and I don't think it really stuck, and we didn't really talk about it that much. But I'm really interested to see what you think. So just you know, and I don't understand this at all, but maybe I don't know. I'm just going to throw it at you. So, like, Nick's here, right? I'm here, and I have this one life that I'm conscious of,
Hmm.
and but once again, we just talked about how you have, I don't know, hundreds of parallel lives, thousands, who knows,
Who
whatever.
knows? Yeah.
So, I don't know. Is this my highest potential that I'm conscious of? Is it not? And also, those other Nicks in all those parallel universes, am I also conscious of them, living in
Mm.
them like I
Yeah.
am right now? But because it's some separated somehow,
Yeah.
that one is thinking the same thing right now about me.
Yeah.
Do you know what
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
kind
I
of
know
throwing
exactly
at
what
you?
you're talking about. Yeah.
Like, what do you think
There
about all
is.
that?
I'll say this real quick. There's a series of books that have completely transformed the way I see everything, especially when I project. And I can give you the series of them. So this is someone told this to me on Reddit, and the reason why I'm telling you about this is a combination of this and what my experiences are have formed my opinion about what you just said. It's called the Seth material. In the 60s and 70s, this woman was a medium, and she did mediumship for this entity that she called Seth, who was a person. And in his idea, he is one of the many entities that are teachers across reality. And so he spoke through her and wrote like 10 books on the nature of consciousness. And at first I was skeptical. After reading this stuff, I was like, oh, this is a real deal. And so his ideas have influenced some of my ideas, but especially as I've experienced stuff, my idea is this. I think that at any given moment, in any given time, you are simultaneously with your other selves sharing, giving, and taking information, skills, ideas, thoughts. You may have a random thought to do something random you've never done before that could have been inspired from another probable self, right? Like, oh, I want to paint. Another version of you might be a good painter. You might have connected on that. I think in dreams we do the same thing. In dreams, we not only interact with our creations, but we interact with other versions of ourselves. Like when we dream and we say, "Hey, that person I was talking to sounds so familiar, but I don't know them." Well, you might know them in another life, either presently, in the past, in the future. Who knows? So I think that there's a constant sharing between the personalities that are part of you could say, soul matrix or oversoul. And I think that everyone is a part of a specific greater personality that represents itself in many different realities, and you are one of the whole, and at the same time the whole. It doesn't make sense, but you have just as much power and ability as your total set, because you have your individuality. You're uniquely you, but at the same time you're a part of a whole. And so I think that, you know I think there's constant feedback that we're not necessarily aware of, because we focus here. Like, why would we focus elsewhere? We're raised to believe that this is it. There's no other reality. There's no nothing. It's just this. Um, I think that human personality is far more complex and far more creative than that. Especially the soul. The soul is far more creative. It's not going to represent itself in five places. It's going to represent itself all across the world. You probably have counterparts that are living right now that are close in connection with your personality, but yet you're separate people. But anyway, I think that it's always our decision to become the best version of ourselves. I think one of the reasons why I think we decided to come here is because we can experience time And time allows us to perceive and understand change. Like it's hard. I think it's hard to understand change if you don't understand a passing of moments. Like you can see yourself a year ago and compare yourself to now, and then you can also compare yourself to what you want to be in 5 years. So I think that um, on a day-to-day basis, like for me, I try to make decisions that can help people, that can give to people. I try to always be health critical in a healthy way of how I respond to people, how I treat people, because I want to be the best version of myself that I can be. But I know that I can't be perfect, right? I can't be amazing at everything, but I have skills and skill sets that I have developed, and skill sets that I find that I develop because I want to continue to create a cohesive experience for myself. And so I think that in our lives, the goal is to strive to be better and better, even in the small things. And it doesn't have to be crazy. You don't have to save the world. But I think at the end of your life, when you do your little review, my goal is to see dramatic change from when I was younger to when I die. I want to do what I can do. One of the reasons why I want to project more is because I want to take part in helping people who feel stuck after death pass on. That's just something that it's something I feel drawn to. I feel drawn to helping people in that way and to getting people in that way. Um, so yeah, I hope that answers your question. I know it's kind of roundabout,
Oh,
but
definitely, man. That was super insightful and very interesting. That was great. Thanks for the response.
no problem.
It sounds like you would be a good fit for what was the name of the group that Rick joined in the
Guide
Astral
school, Astral
Guide
Guide
School?
School.
It sounds
Yeah,
like
I've
that would
actually
be
been I've
where
been
you
making
should.
request I've been making requests, and I've had a couple testing dreams.
Nice.
I think right now I'm like 1 for 2. I'm sure I failed 2 of them and I passed one of them. So um,
Wow.
it's
Th-
something that I'm actively trying to pursue, and I don't.
That's awesome, man.
I want to figure out what it is because I want to figure out what it is I want to do. Being a guide is a very, 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 very intense commitment. Um, but something I do want to do is try to figure out where I fit in. Because so, from what I understand, a lot of people are guides in certain ways without even knowing it. Like when you sleep and dream, you might travel to someone and help them, but you don't know you're helping them. It's just there's this weird background collaboration with people that
Hmm.
that happens like outside of what we perceive when we're awake. And but for me, I definitely want to try guide school and see what it's like. I know Rick's given me some good advice and thoughts, and I kind of have an idea of what it's going to be like. But obviously, you know, if I ever get the chance, which I think I will at some point, I'll have a better understanding of what that responsibility is.
Well, you got this, man. I feel like you got it just on our conversation, and
I appreciate it.
you got the fearlessness and the courage. So like I think you got this. So let's dive into some your adventures and stuff if that's cool with you.
Yeah, sure.
So you talked about your first one where you hopped on out and you went to your
hmm
back door. Do you want to go in chronological order of some cool ones that you are highlights, or do you just want to bounce around? Whatever you
I'll
want to do,
bounce
Joseph.
around because
Yeah,
if chronological order, I have to go through all my notes. I'll just bounce around to what comes
yeah,
to my
man.
mind.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think after my first experience, I had a few experiences that were really interesting. Um, I would say I did have an experience where I was listening to the tapes and I realized I was projecting. I sat up, and when I sat up, I could see my how do I? I'm laying on my side and I sat up, and so I could see my sleeping body to my right and to my left, because I was like out of it, but I could see myself sleeping. And at this point, I was still dealing with fear. So I was looking around and I see this weird fish looking creature swim by me. And I was like, nope. And I woke up because I didn't, because I'm not familiar. I'm still getting familiar with the what you could call the wildlife. There's all sorts of stuff. I don't know.
Huh.
I can still see it in my mind. I wish I could draw it. It was just weird. It was like a
That's so fun.
fish,
That's
but it
so
was
funny. And
odd. It was very odd.
in your room, this flew
Yeah,
on by.
just flying over because you know
That's so
I
interesting.
think everything exists in terms of frequency, density, and vibration. So there's a blend. You know, like for
Yeah.
example, with the UFO phenomenon, there are people that have studied to talk about how some of these species are like here but to the side, as in they're here on Earth, but they exist in a reality that's separate, like vibrationally,
Yeah.
and they can pass between easily because they have got advanced technology, or whatever. But yeah, that was weird. And then I had another one where I found myself floating up at an angle from my body, and I don't know if this was a projection of my fear, but I remember looking in the corner and I see a little rift opening up, like a portal almost. And I see these like three or four like ugly looking creatures like laughing at me because of my fear. And it reminded me of when Robert Monroe had a projection and he saw these like weird, you know, entities, and he was like praying to God, and they laughed at him. They're like, what did they say to him? He said, look at him praying to his gods, and mockingly. So I remember looking at these things, and they look like I can't remember what they. You ever seen Ghostbusters?
Oh yeah.
You know that green, slimy looking ghost? They look like
Yeah.
that in a way.
Oh okay.
They were
Huh.
kind of just like laughing at me and pointing at me, and I was scared, um and that was one of my first interactions with like fear, but it wasn't like harmful. It was just unique because I had to accept that, whether it's a projection of my own or not, there are other things that exist outside of me, and they all exist in different levels of vibrational energy. The lower levels we perceive as evil, as bad, as hell like. In reality, it's just a different type of energy and a manifestation of that. So, and then my second major
The
experience,
really quick, the fear didn't pop you back into your body from seeing them.
not instantly, no. I just saw them and I was like a little scared, and they were like pointing at me, and I remember saying like I'm not afraid, I'm not afraid, but they're like mocking and like laughing at that. And then when I woke up, I was afraid, but I was like, man, it was again. I took insanely detailed notes in every single attempt, my feelings, what was going on, and I was able to understand. Okay, this is a step in the right direction. I took a little bit of a
Nice.
step closer to the fear. That's the way I am. I work things out better if I take good notes, and so my my projection notes, especially from when I first started, are like super long and detailed. But
Nice.
and I remember I had another dream, a projection, not a dream, where I projected, and I had an intent to go this place in France that I'd been to that I really liked. And I remember I left my body, and this was different. I saw my door, and it was like a tunnel, and I was found myself floating and pushing through what felt like gigantic black styrofoam cubes. It was very odd. So I was like almost swimming and pushing them aside, and I saw my door, and I was trying to focus on this place I was trying to go to. And then maybe distance is so tough, but I don't know how far I was away from my door. I wasn't that far away. And as I'm getting closer, and I think I feel myself kind of leaving, I feel two gigantic hands that grab my waist. Now, this was new because I was like, what is that? But immediately I kind of knew whatever this thing wasn't like malicious. It kind of felt like, you ever seen, in Walmart or something, a toddler running around and a parent kind of grabs them? That's kind of what
Yeah.
it felt like. And they didn't, and this thing didn't feel human. It kind of felt like its hands, it kind of felt like it turned, whatever it had his hands, it felt like it turned into like gloves and just grabbed me very gently, but like firmly, almost like, hey, let's relax a little bit. Like maybe you're not ready for this. I still don't know what it was, But it was very interesting. And I woke up and I was like, what was that? And that's one of the ones I was like, oh, this is weird. And that weirdness just pulled me in. It was weird. It pushed me past my fear because I'm a very curious person. And I was like, this is crazy. So,
Wow.
and then another experience I remember, I shared this with Rick because I did a little thing with Rick a couple weeks ago because I was just trying to work on getting my projection consistent again. And
Hmm.
so what was nice is because I'm not new. We got to skip all that and just talk about stuff. So
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I remember I was listening to shamanic drumming, this specific video on YouTube that I really liked. And I'm listening to it. It's very calm. It's very cool. And I can feel myself leaving my body. But I was having some difficulty. This is where it gets interesting. I all of a sudden feel someone like grab me under my left arm, like under my armpit. And it was this man. I didn't see him, but I felt him. And when I felt him, I could see his image, strong, Native American. I could tell he was very wise, very advanced, very helpful. Um, it's so I when I think about him, it's so clear, but it's so hard to describe it. And he grabbed me, and I could. It was so noteworthy his strength. It didn't just feel like physical strength; it felt like spiritual strength. It was very interesting,
Wow.
and I could tell he had on a Native American uh, get, outfit on, and um, and he grabbed me firmly and just like lifted me up out of my body. But I'm at this point, I'm not used to things interacting with me, so I was like, I felt calm, but I was like, I don't know, what is this? It was weird, and so then I snapped back in my body. I was like, what is that? Again,
Oh.
another crumb that I was like, I got to figure this out.
So he just came along
It
and
was
wanted to
some
help
sort
you
of
out or
guide.
something, huh?
It was a guide. Yeah, you know, there's a lot of guides that have been humans in the past. I'm not surprised it was Native American. You know, that culture is so deeply spiritual. I'm sure there's plenty of them flying around helping people. You know.
Yeah, and I wonder if the shamanic drumming
Yes, that's what
helped.
I was wondering too. Because
I don't know.
that's a culture I've always felt some kind of connection to. And so, of the reincarnational, I'm aware of three reincarnational experience existences that I have. I'm sure of many, and I'm certain one of them was somewhere in the native in with a native tribe. But I'm I'm certain that music helped draw that. That's also what I felt. I was like, oh, that music is, you know, it just fit what was going on.
Yeah.
You know, so
Will you ever go and try to find that out through astral projection?
for sure, yeah.
If you,
Once I'm trying to get to my projections, like at one point I was projecting like twice a night, four times a week for like weeks.
whoa,
It
man.
got to a point where it was too much, and I had to tell myself to slow down. I don't know what was going on, but
Why do you say it was too much? Like you were drained into
it was too
physical?
It was so stimulating. This was my first 6 months of consistency, and it was like a lot. It was just a lot to deal with because every time I lay my head down within 15 seconds, I hear the loud rushing water and I pop out, and it was just a lot.
That's amazing.
I'm begging for those moments now because I feel like
Yeah.
I've grown so much, and they'll
So
come.
so it was overstimulating. What to the point where you felt it in the physical, like it drained you, or
No,
like what do you mean?
it was just my experiences tend to be very stimulating and very uh, energetic. I think this is because I'm naturally a very energetic person. So I think when I leave, my vibratory rate is always on like 10. It was just a lot. It was just, you
I
know,
gotcha.
I would project, I would go out, I'd feel called back, and I'm like, all right, do I want to journal and go back to sleep, or like kind of touch base and then go back out again? And it would just happen a lot. And it was at a point where I was like, okay, I kind of want to just like get some regular sleep. You know what I mean? It got to that
Yeah.
point because, you know,
I, that's
it's
new to
interesting.
me. That's cool. I didn't know people can project that much. I've never heard of anyone projecting that frequently. That's amazing, man.
Yeah, there's a guy I talked to on Reddit. that says he's been able to project every day for like the last couple of months, and he sent me actually a little book of a new method that I'm trying out. I tried it out today in the afternoon, and it was relatively successful. I'm going to try it out tonight and the next few nights and days and mornings. Um, I've met people that can project very consistently. It just depends on the person. But yeah, at one point it was twice. It was always twice. I go out, do my thing, and I feel called back. And then when I get back in my body, I hear the sounds again, and I'm like, oh, I can go back out again. And then I just learned that not all the time, but for a decent amount of time, it was twice. It was back to back to back to back to back. It was
Is
crazy.
that when you were listening to HemiSync, or were you beyond that at
No,
that
this
point?
is this is way after that. This is
Gotcha. Yeah.
once I got my bearings and started doing it on my own, they just kept rolling in, and they were
Nice.
all like different. So
That's sweet.
anyway, I remember another projection where when I first started to go past the hemisync and I started to really get into it, they just got weirder and weirder. So I remember this is something I don't recall, unfortunately. But here and there, when I would project, I would feel. So I don't get the vibrations. I've been getting them more recently, which is interesting. So I'm
Hmm.
having to get used to that. Like this afternoon, I tried to project and I felt the vibrations, and because I'm not used to it, like I don't. I'm only used to my way, So I'm like, now I feel
Well,
like the people on Reddit that are like, when do I leave?
yeah,
So
really quick, Joseph. Sorry to interrupt you. So, what is your? Because that's I hear that the most is the vibrations and the noise and
yeah,
stuff. So, what is your way then before you exit? Is it smoother? Like,
yeah, it's way smooth. I mean, once you start doing it a lot, it's smooth. You don't really have to do much. But
gotcha.
for me, even that's changed. My signals have changed. I don't hear the sounds as loud, but yeah, I hear like a loud rushing water static sound,
Okay,
and then at some point it just stops, and I either hear I either hear and feel a click, and then I can just float up, um, or I can just roll out or do the spin thing, or like whatever. Depends on my body position, but
gotcha.
it really
Gotcha.
depends. So anyway, I remember another instance where from time to time when I would hear my signal, I'd open my eyes and I'd see a pink purple hue, and I would hear this really peaceful like tone, and it's so hard to describe. It's like you ever I just can't describe it. It's this one solid tone, and I could feel it in my body and I could hear it. It's very pleasant. And I remember this is early on, and so what is why I don't remember. I remember like hearing this, and it was very calming. And then I remember seeing this is so crazy. I remember seeing this woman, pink hair, fairy elf looking. She grabbed my arm and just whispered something gently in my ear, and then grabbed me and just flew me off. But I don't remember what happened. I did, and I just woke up and I was like, "What was that?" Again, another crumb. It was like, "What's going on?" It was just weird.
Wow.
It was very.
You
I
don't
remember.
remember or what
I
she said
don't
in your ear?
know. I just
And
remember her grabbing me and whispering something. But she
and
was
that
grabbing my
did,
astral body and then just flying me off, go on some kind of journey. It was some kind
so
of
she
journey
was
or
with you.
adventure.
She didn't launch you off. She was with you, flying
No,
you
she was
off.
with me and then
Yeah.
flew me off. But
Gotcha.
but
Gotcha.
then let's talk about launching. Then I remember having a projection where I was laying down on my stomach and I felt the sounds and I was going to exit, and I felt someone grab my ankles. One hand grabbed me at the same time, and then it just drugged me. When I say drug me, I felt like my body was like rubbing on the floor. It drugged me and then lifted me up, and I was like, no, woke up because I didn't know what was going on. I don't know what
Yeah.
that was. This was my first time having something interact with me and take me somewhere. I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
And so then it happened again. I was like, what's going on? And I was like, okay, whatever this is, it's not like negative, you know? So then one day I made a request. I was like, okay, if this is a guide, just take me and throw me. Don't drag me. And
Yeah.
then the next time I projected, grabbed me, lifted me up, and just threw me like a shot put. And then I ended up having a really cool projection after that. where I was flying through this very kind of looked like Minecraft. It wasn't Minecraft. It was this. I think that there's different levels of dimensions. This specific one was very bubble cube like. There was some land, grass, but it looked weird. It looked like I said, it kind of looked like
Like
Minecraft, but it
pixelated
wasn't like yes, yes.
or pixelated?
In a
Interesting.
way, it was a combination between I know bubble like is really hard to describe. Bubble like, real, and pixelated. Almost like someone was like working on a project but didn't really finish it. So I saw these square bubble looking blues and reds, and I was just flying up and down and getting used to flight. I was in a very high vibrational area. The colors were very bright. The energy was very high. I was flying. That's how you know you're in a higher level. When you start to fly, your vibrations raise as you move up in energy level, um, and frequency. And so I remember, and this was another crumb. I was like, this is why I like projection. It's so fascinating. I remember flying around and I look to the right, top right. So there's no walls in this place. It's just white. And I see an opening. It looks like a door. And I'm looking through the door and I see a city. I was like, what is that? So I flew to the door opening and I stood on the opening and looked, and it was a city, just a regular city. And I don't think it was on Earth, but I see cars driving and people walking, and I was like, what? So I stepped through the opening, I touched down, I just walked. And I was like, where am I? I'm just walking around. It's literally like normal life. And I remember I see this restaurant, and it was one of those restaurants in a city where there's no seating. It's kind of like you go up to the counter and order. I see all these people in this line talking to this guy at front trying to order money. They're waving money around. There's a sign with food, and I was like, what is this? And I was just nosy, and I walked in. I moved. Obviously, I can touch it. I just moved through the booth, and I walked in the kitchen, and I'm looking around. I remember seeing a guy making wings and putting his hands on his hips and looking at the crowd outside. I remember a guy prepping some, frying some food, and I stuck my head in the fridge to see what was in there. Obviously, the fridge was dark. I couldn't see anything. I was just being nosy. It was really weird. I
Yeah.
was walking around, just looking. It was just people enjoying their life, working in a restaurant. They had white aprons on with some dirt on them. It was a small kitchen. There were sinks. There were stations. People were at. I think there was like one, two, three, like 4 or 5 people in the restaurant, and and then my alarm went off for work, and I was like, oh, and I went back to my body. And so that was a really odd one. Another one I remember. I was okay. This is another parallel Earth one. I remember it was an afternoon, and when I project in the afternoon and the morning, they're very different than nighttime. I suspect that it's because my energy level. When I project at night, I'm going deep, different dimensions. We talking about crazy exotic places. Morning and afternoon, it's usually like layers of earth, usually other stuff like that. But regardless, this time I left my body and did my little roll out, stood up, looked around. This is what I do, and then I moved through my wall. And so I was talking to Rick about this. I moved through my wall, and it felt like I was moving through. Imagine two bouncy houses pressed against each other. And imagine trying to move through them. You get that weird bubble. That's what it felt like. It felt like I was moving through two bouncy houses, and the color was very beige.
Huh.
And I was moving through. I was like, what is this? And I was moving through, moving through, moving through, and I popped out on the other side of a wall, and there was a big, tall, black fence in front of me. I was like, what's going on? So I climbed the fence. This reality was very dense, so I couldn't fly. Energetically, it wasn't really vibing with what I was at, so I couldn't fly. I could just
Hmm.
run, right? Which is a little concerning for me. I'm like, all right, I gotta,
Yeah.
so, I'm jumped this fence and I started running across this area and I see, oh, these are houses, but the architecture was so odd. It was different, like the way the houses looked, and the you could tell
How would
that.
you describe them? What
Oh God,
material and what style
well,
or
it
something?
looked like normal, but it looked like a combination between like, let me think, like, oh man, Spanish, Dutch, modern American. It was blocky.
Huh.
It was just odd. It was I can't even I can see it, but I couldn't even draw it for you. It was very weird. But I could tell these are big houses, big houses, and obviously people live there, and but the feeling of this place was so weird. Of all the experiences I've had, this place I just felt the weirdest.
Oh, really?
It was just I
It,
felt
when
like I
when you
didn't
say
belong.
weird,
Yeah, that's hard to describe too. When I say weird, I mean imagine being put in the most foreign place you could think. Like I could feel it. I could feel how weird it was.
huh?
You know, like when people, the only way I can liken it, when people have like UFO experiences and they see a UFO, they have this feeling of like this doesn't belong here. Like they have this weird, it's just this weird like feeling.
Yeah.
And weird does not really describe it, but that's like the best word. So I remember running across this area and I didn't know what was going on. I was like, where am I? Um, I like to help conquer my fear. I like to play a game with myself called Astral Roulette, which basically I realized that every time I leave my body, I go somewhere random. So I just embraced it. I was like, all right, where are we going to end up today? So it just helped me
Nice, man.
play a game with myself. And so I remember coming up to this house. It looked like a country house, you know, old house, wooden house. And I see to the right of this house, there's this fenced off area with imagine like the on a baseball diamond, that reddish clay. It was like that, and it was this woman, looked like she was in like a I don't know, like a farmer's getup. She's older, probably in her 60s, 50s, 60s. Didn't look like different, and there was two kids with her, and I climbed their fence because I when I from time to time you can be seen, but sometimes you can't. Most of the time you can't, depending on whether. But these people could see me.
Oh, really?
And I climbed the fence, and she turned at me, and it was all telepathic communication from this point on.
Huh?
And she was
Wow.
like, "What are you doing? Stop!" And I was like, and this is when it gets weird. I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." But when I said I'm sorry, she didn't really know what I was talking about. That's what was so weird. Their
Huh?
social customs were so different. When she spoke to me and I spoke to her, I could feel what she was feeling pointed at me. Then I could also feel her perception of my response. When I said I'm sorry, I felt like it just hit a wall. Like it didn't even register to her what I was, and that was like,
Whew.
that still baffles me. It's
S-
such a weird feeling.
Yeah, that's
Such a
interesting.
weird, it's
So wait,
very
is it this
interesting.
is? I heard it's all telepathic in the
It's
astral,
all
correct?
telepathic, all telepathic.
So
Work
that was all done telepathically between you two.
telepathically.
You would think
Yeah.
that she would have the ability to feel, because you felt her
Oh, I'm
response to
sure she
you.
felt my confusion, but again, I don't know what I look like to her, from her perspective.
Oh
That's
yeah,
another
good
thing.
point.
That's
Yeah, good
another
point.
thing. You see what you expect to see. So like depending on what you're used to, you can perceive things. But sometimes like when you end up in these vague dimensions, it all depends on your perception. But in this case, I'm assuming I saw like I looked like a human. She was like, "What are you doing? Stop!" And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." So I went back down the fence, and she just kept staring at me and projecting this weird energy.
Oh,
And
so
then these
she was
kids,
just looking at you, making sure that you back
yeah,
off.
she was suspicious of me.
Yeah.
And I tried to be like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I was very apologetic, but it just wasn't connecting.
Huh.
And then the kids, I don't know why I ran away. These kids ran after me, and they were speaking to me telepathically, like being like playful. I could just feel what they were. I
Oh, they
can't remember
wanted
what
to
they
play with
said,
you. It wasn't more of
but
a get the hell out of here.
they were like running after me, and I was like, I just ran away. I didn't know what was going on.
Uh,
I just ran. I remember like running away with some fear, and then I woke up, and I was like, "What is going on?" So,
huh,
um, yeah, that was
that's
very
crazy.
odd. Um, I remember one time, I I remember it was around Halloween of 2022. We were seeing some Halloween like decorations and stuff, and I remember I had a projection, This was probably the weirdest place I've ever been to. And here's why. I've only heard of people going through this a couple of times, but I projected to this place that was essentially like, it looked like Super Mario Galaxy.
Huh.
Like, imagine being in Super Mario Galaxy without Mario. So we're projecting because I was like, "Is this a dream?" But I was like, "Definitely not." And I remember it's just so crazy. I remember I was floating around and I looked. And I was like, "Where am I?" I heard this like music. It was so weird. It was like a video game. It was Halloween themed, and I'm assuming it's because it was Halloween around that time. And I remember looking at the clouds, and they had this weird. They were dark clouds. They had this weird angry face, and they were floating towards me. But I kind of pushed them off, and I mean, I saw these birds, five or six of them, just flying in a circle, like a video game, just flying around. And then I'm looking at the state, the ground, and I see like gravestones popped up in a little mist, and it was so strange because I was like, I quite literally don't belong here. It was very odd. But when it comes to the multiverse, almost everything's possible. So I surmise this could have been a couple of things. This could have been actually legitimate. This also could have been a thought energy creation of someone who was creating a video game that never got finished, or a video game that is finished, maybe in this reality or other realities. Because something you have to realize is that um, consciousness always creates. Human beings are creators in general. We are more creative than we think we are. What you think will become something, either here or somewhere else,
Yeah.
right? What you think, what they say, as a man think he is, like what you think will create your reality in some way. And so this could have been a thought energy thing, but I don't know. But I remember flying up to this castle, and the lead, the head townsperson was communicating with me, and he was saying, speaking a language I did not know, but I could feel what he wanted. He wanted me to help with something in like the field in front of him. But I'm here floating in front of this dude that's like gotta be like 2 feet tall, and the dimension itself was small, at least to me. And this is my first time in a place like this, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I see that he needs help, but I'm too busy distracted by what's around me to even figure out. I was like, what's going on? It was so random. And then I woke up and I journaled that one. That one was very, very interesting.
That is very interesting, man. So it's like,
Yeah,
yeah, it's like it really blows my mind thinking you have billions of people in the world all thinking tons of different things, and those create somewhere out there,
somewhere. Yeah, and I don't.
and just think about that being magnified and then parallelness to all
Yeah,
of that.
you know,
It's very cool.
I don't know if this was a thought creation or just an actual dimension. I'm sure
Yeah.
it could have been either one. Um, but it was very interesting. But yeah, anything, you think about the back in the day, the ancient Egyptians, people from all around the world would come to learn from them because they had knowledge of what's really going on in reality, like the fact that you create quite literally your reality. There's a mechanism by which every single person has their own little space-time continuum, and no experience is the same. We agree, like I agree that you have a mic, and you agree that you have a mic, but it's two different mics. It's the mic of my creation, the mic of your creation. Because thought always creates no matter what, whether it's physical
Oh,
or not physical. And so, the idea is that we are more powerful than we think we are. We just don't know it.
yeah. Yeah, that's cool what you just said. So when you say that, do you mean you physically right now are seeing a different mic than I'm seeing, but we think we're seeing the same mic? Or do you mean
We
something
we
else?
we agree that there's the same mic,
Yeah,
just in
yeah.
the background as a rule. But yes, every
That
reality, in my opinion, is completely different.
yeah,
It just so happens that like if there were five people in a room, there's technically five different yous. but from different
Yeah.
perspectives. It's very odd.
And it's really weird because you can't confirm it really. There's kind of like no way to prove it.
Unless, so what you can do, this is where projection comes in. So something you can do when you project, again, the body can be small or big. So something you can do is study the nature of reality through projection. You can minimize yourself to see the energetic connections between things as they're actively created. You can see how people create their own reality through, because I think there's a level of physics involved in everything, but it's a type of physics that don't really make sense right now to us. So
Yeah.
you can study those things, and you can learn. There are astral sleep schools. People when will you have entities that are teaching people stuff, hoping that it sticks. Rick was telling me about a class he saw called the holographic universe. You'll have entities that will show you these things. Hey, this is reality. This is what's going on. So this information is accessible, but in different ways.
Hmm.
And so, but you got to do it for yourself. That's just my opinion. I think that's why, quote unquote manifestation of the thing. I think that's just a principle of reality. I think what you focus on, you will get, but it just has to play by the rules, right? Like if I win $1 million, odds are I'm not going to get $1 million tomorrow. But if I keep those thoughts in my head, I might find myself in various positions where I meet this person, meet this person. Eventually, I'll get that money, but it has to play by the rules.
Yep.
So anyway, um,
Yeah. It's so cool. Hey,
it's
did
it's
you ever
very
play
interesting.
Super Mario Galaxy?
I did when I was younger. Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
When I was younger, yeah. That's what just reminded me of. It was a little different, but
Yeah.
that's just what came to my mind.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so another time I remember, this was probably the most terrifying projection I had, and I approached this on Reddit, and it wasn't terrifying because I met some demon like Rick. Rick is an interesting guy. He had a talk with a demon once. He's done some stuff that I'm like I'm straight on that. He's a brave soul, but he also has so much. He's been projecting longer than I've been alive, so he's kind of run the gamut. I remember I left my body. Oh, I rolled out of my body, and I remember looking at my sheets, and the sheet looked like a hood. It was kind of hooded up, and it was dark in the hood. And I was like, I put my ear to the hood, and I could hear waves crashing and sounds. I was like, "What's that?" And so I was like, "All right, I'm going in there." And at the time, I didn't know what was going on, so I popped in there, and then I found myself on another planet. I could see the sunset in the distance, and it was complete chaos. I was in the middle of like a storm. When I say a storm, I mean like a hurricane type. Waves were gigantic, crashing everywhere, thunder, lightning, and then I started getting attacked by these gigantic pterodactyl-looking creatures.
Huh.
It was so terrifying. Even though I couldn't get hurt, I was like, because it was random. I just got thrown into this. They were just flying at me and attacking me, and I was trying to fly around. I was trying to figure out what was going on. And at the same time, I'm looking at this sunset, and I was like, and I see some land. I'm like, I gotta go because I don't know where I'm at. And I don't know. Did I go to the past, present? Am I on some random planet with like dinosaur-like creatures? And so as I'm trying to fly towards this sunset, another set of terrifying creatures just starts attacking me. And keep in mind, it's storming, it's lightning, it's raining,
Yeah.
the waves are crashing. I don't know where I'm at, and it was
What did
it.
those dinosaurs look like, or the
It
other
was so
ones?
hard to describe. They were both flying,
Okay.
reptilian type things. Very, it's so hard to picture, like describe what they look like. Very scary looking, alien, very alien. Um, just not fun. And their energy was very primal. It wasn't intelligent whatsoever. It was like, I see you, something's going on. Again, I don't know what I look like to them,
Oh
but they
yeah.
could perceive me in some kind of way because I
And
felt like
none
they
of them
were.
got you. You were dodging them,
Well,
or
yeah, but at the end of the day, I was also non-physical, so I couldn't be touched or hurt. But I didn't know. I knew that sometimes you get in a situation where you know this, but your human mind kind of is like, I'm just, scared. Your primal was a very primal fear.
Yeah.
And I was like, what do I do? And I looked down in the water. I was like, if there's stuff up here, I am not going down there. I don't know what's down there. I don't like deep water anyway.
Yeah.
And I should have, again, hindsight, I should have flew up to see where I was, but because I was so scared, I woke up. Heart was beating fast.
Oh
And
man.
that was a point where I was like, do I want to keep doing this? Because
Oh
I
really?
texted, because I messaged Rick. I was like, this is what happened. He was like, this is projection is not for the faint of heart. But I told myself, like, I can't let it stop. I've been
Yeah.
this far. I can't, I just got to deal with it. One of these
When
days, you go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead. And
No, no, you can go.
I was just going to say. So, when did that one happen? Was this in the middle
This
between
was
2022?
this
No.
was like late 2022, a couple months before my projections kind of just slowed, like stopped.
Okay.
From early 2023 up until a few months ago, my projections went from consistent to like one, two every couple of months. It was rough. Last year was rough. I don't know. I still don't really know why, but they're getting back again. But yeah, this was one of the ones I was like, man, this is right. And I was like shook up by it because it was so, I don't want to say it was traumatic, but it was just because it was so instantly chaotic and I was so scared. It really, I didn't project for like a couple weeks after that because
I was just about to ask that.
I really had to consider, do I want to keep doing this? But again, that curiosity, I was like, I gotta keep, I gotta keep going
Every time that's going to get you. You could go through
every
something worse than
time,
that, and you're gonna. That
every
curiosity is
time.
gonna like
Yeah,
drive you forward.
yeah. But
It sounds
now,
like.
I feel much more mature. So I think I have a lot more control. Like, because when I would find myself in positions, I wasn't at a point where I could be like, all right, I'm done. Let me go somewhere else. I'm still learning how to fly, how to move, how to travel. I'm so concerned with what's around me. I don't really think about exit strategies and stuff because I'm like, this is so new. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So I found myself in these really odd places. So I have like a lot more, but I think, something I've learned is that, as I mentioned before, we're very complex creatures. We have many different versions of us, and I have three reincarnational existences that are connected with projection that are very meaningful. Um, One of them I experienced via the gateway experience. There's a section where you get five questions. He asks a question. And one of the questions was, who was I before this physical matter reality? And I remember, this is my first one. I remember getting I got a flash of a very clear scene. And I see this rock formation, and I see these people on what looked like motorcycles. I think they were like hovercraft, and they were going up and down these ramps. And I instantly perceive, oh, this is some kind of sport. And I see people cheering them on different like rock extension pieces, and then I see one of the racers that was me stop, take his helmet off, and it was some green looking alien thing. And I was like, what? And then it stopped. And
Wow.
then I had another instance where I asked the same question, and then I saw the same life, but I was a baby and I was abandoned. And I saw these two alien looking creatures walking up to me and picking me up. And like, I felt the love, and it was so palpable. It was so weird, so palpable. And I felt the love, and I could feel that abandonment, like uh, drifting away, because I knew I had found a family finally. This is emotion. This is crazy. And then I remember one day I was just thinking about Robert Monroe and some of his experiences, and I had a dream. I don't think this is a dream. I'm sure it wasn't a dream. I woke up and I'm in another body. And I remember this so vividly. I remember looking around. It was humid. It was hot. I felt like I was somewhere in Europe, maybe France. And I'm looking around. I see all these people in these 1800s outfits. I remember seeing a woman walk by me with a little umbrella and this white dress looking thing. I see men and women with suits on, and I was like, What's going on?" I look and I see a newsstand, and I pick up a paper, and I see the date, and it says 1815, and then I wake up.
Huh.
I was like, "What is this? So weird?" And I remember I did a past life regression with someone who worked with the Monroe Institute. This is something I never ever thought I'd do, but I did it, and she lives in my area, because I was trying to find out more about this alien life because it was so meaningful. It felt so meaningful to me. Something about it was like it's just stuck out.
The racer one or the baby one?
Both that life, that same life. It was the same life from different perspectives. That life
Oh,
just
okay.
felt like something was special about it.
Gotcha.
I think that as we move through existences, there are certain lifetimes that we hold with more value because of what we experience, which is, I think, a reason why we might like certain things or fear certain things because we kind of might carry those things over. So, anyway, I remember trying to get more information about this life, and she had this really good meditation thing. And then for a brief second, 5 seconds, I find myself as this little boy in this pod looking out at this futuristic city. Like these buildings were like chrome and everything was shiny, and I felt like this was some sort of far future. And I had my hands up against this glass, and it was this tour, and I was just looking in amazement of this new city and this place. I kind of felt like I was traveling a little bit, doing something, and then that ended. I don't know what that. I think I just caught that in while I was trying to move through. And as I was doing this, I was explaining to her what I was seeing. And then I got my last vision of that alien life. And this is something that I actually mentioned this to Rick, and he kind of perceived some of the history of that place. He was very, perceptive. I remember I was older. Um, I remember being in a ship, and I'm in front of a cave, and I think I'm in my 20s or 30s, and I move into this cave, and I find myself looking at this platform again. I'm seeing myself through this body. It's kind of like a movie playing. I have no control. I'm just seeing through this person's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And I press this button. I move this platform. And this platform goes up into the top of what I guess the cave was. I hop into my craft, and it looks like a giant tulip, silver tulip, I guess. And I'm turning the craft on. I remember seeing it. I'm turning the craft on, and I felt a couple of things. I looked at this beautiful blue planet, and I had these feelings. I felt like and I'm not saying this to say I'm special. I felt like I was some sort of royalty. I felt like it seemed like this was a moon. I felt like I was getting supplies. But the more impactful thing was I felt like I was one of the few people on the earth because something had happened that had killed most of the inhabitants.
Hmm.
And I felt that pain and that feeling of just being by myself and that feeling of like those feelings of abandonment. I had these thoughts that in the past I had felt abandoned because I wasn't wanted by my original birth parents. Now I remember being in this craft and just flying towards this beautiful blue planet, and then it just ended.
Wow.
So when it comes to projection, I think that while I have stories, I think that this has led me down a path to discover more of myself. you know,
Yeah.
and not just my reincarnational existences, but like who I am, what I am. You know, it's made me much more kind. I understand people more. I don't really get into arguments. I try to lift people up because I know that being on Earth kind of sucks. You know, it's
Oh,
rough.
really?
It's rough. I'm just no, I'm not for me, but I'm just in general. This is a notably a very difficult place to incarnate because it's very solid. It's not very flexible. It's you can go through a lot of struggle, but I think the reason why people choose to be here is because of that. There's a richness to Earth experience you can't get in a lot of places. Um, and so, you know, I try my best to be a light because I know that um, there's nothing else I can be. You know, I've gotten to a point now with projections and all this stuff where it's like, you know, I think the goal of every person is and should be to truly treat people how you want to be treated. Because I think at the end of the day, you're dealing with people that are simply a projection of you. Obviously, I'm not saying that like you or me and I'm you, but I'm saying you're dealing with the reality of not only your creation, but a reality where when you're interacting with someone, there's a reflective element to it. You know, I
Yeah.
very much feel like when you hurt someone, you're kind of hurting yourself in a way. Because I think
I
we're
agree.
a part of a greater whole. And
Yeah.
um, so yeah, you know, those are some of my stories. Let me see if I can find just one more because I gotta leave soon. Hold on, let me just scroll through
Well, yeah, Joseph,
my notes
that's
real
cool.
quick.
Yeah, we can, and you know what, man, we can always, come back together, months down or years, whatever, and maybe you can share more if that's cool with you,
Yeah,
if
for
it works
sure.
out.
Let me just share one more story.
Yeah, definitely, as much as you want, man.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, one. Okay. Oh man, I have so many. Okay. Okay. Last year, this is an interesting one. Um, I I was on a flight to Denver for work. It was a work conference, and I'm on this plane. It's a later flight, and I'm like, you know, let me see if I can project on this flight. I had heard about it, and I'm like, what's going to happen? So I didn't know what was going to happen. I laid my head down, drifting off to sleep, and I wake up, and I feel like I'm ready to go, and I just pop out of my body very easily. So I'm moving through the aisle, and at first I was like, okay, this might not, like, it's just a plane. There's nothing there. At the time, I was a little iffy about going outside. I knew obviously it didn't hurt, but I was like, you know, I don't know where I'm at, you know? So, and again, at this point, I'm not thinking like I am now. I'm not thinking I want to go somewhere else because I'm so engaged in the moment. And as I'm moving into the plane, the scene just shifts. Sometimes when you project, as you the places you end up, it's just a shift in your energy level. Because, you know, I think that you are composed of a certain kind of energy that will vibrate. And depending on where you are, that vibration will just match something according to your emotions, your thoughts, and that's what you experience. Because these different realities, whether they're physical or non-physical, they just exist in different kinds of frequency and perception. So it snaps and I'm on this plane, but it's not a normal plane. It's gigantic. It's like a twin fuselage. Like there's two cabins connected to each other, like one big plane part, another big plane part. But this, I felt that this was a gigantic plane, and this was a long flight. Like, I don't know if it was days or weeks. It was long.
Hmm.
I see mountains in the distance. Um, and it's just a regular flight. People are talking. There's a lot of seats. Usually on a plane, there's 3 or 4 rows. These had like 5 or 6 rows on each side, and the seats could turn so you could face the person behind you. And I kind of perceived that there are certain seats you could buy that allowed you to interact with people. It's very odd. I moved through this plane and I see through the window other people on the other plane, and I perceived that, and I'm sure I'm picking up on what people are thinking. These other people are the rich people. I see, because when you're out of body, your vision is like a hawk. You can zoom in on anything, on an atom, whatever. And I see, I remember seeing this guy in this suit eating some food in this white table, and I could tell there was fancy music playing, and it was like the posh side, we don't want the pores. It was very different. I remember, and this is another interesting thing that I noticed. I'm moving to the back of the plane, just looking around again. I'm trying to figure out where I'm at. At this point, because I've had so many projections, I knew, okay, I'm another version of reality. It's not crazy different. People are normal. They look normal. And I passed by these kids playing, and one or two of them stopped playing and just looks at me. I noticed that when I do project around kids, one of them will see me. Because they say kids are perceptive. I fully believe that because I don't think they're polluted by
Yeah.
the junk. And so one of them just looks. I just remember this kid, they're 5 or 6, playing, just stopped and just looked at me. And the look was he was full of so much curiosity and like wonder. It was so crazy because he just paused everything and he just looking at me. And I don't know what I look like to him. I'm not trying to scare him, so I'm just saying, I should have just waved, but I just looked at him and he looked at me, and then I just passed by. That was a very interesting part. And then I moved through the rest of the plane, and um, it was gigantic. I mean, there was like
Was it like a
restaurants in there.
cruise, but in the sky, or was it
Something.
more
That's a
like
good
a?
point. That's a good point. It was something like that.
Hmm.
But there was like a hospital in the back. There was a bunch of stuff. It was huge. I mean, it was
Whew.
gigantic. And yeah, and then I just looked around. I just went all the way. I was like, this plane is long, and then I woke up, on the way to Denver, and I immediately journaled. But yeah,
Hmm.
that was very, 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 very interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
indeed.
yeah,
Wow.
that was a very, very odd one. But
So what's your guess then? That's the year 5,000,
I don't
or
know.
and that's here on
I
Earth, or that's somewhere
felt
else. What's your
I
guess?
didn't feel like it was that far in the future.
Huh.
I felt like this was another reality where technologies went in a different direction.
Yeah.
It didn't really feel that like that Chrome City. That felt like if it wasn't this reality, it was another reality, but way in the future, way, way, way in the future.
Yeah.
This one just felt, in my opinion, I think that the plane I was on and the plane that was moving just existed in the same vibratory rate, and I just shifted over.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I think that because of that closeness, the reality that I was in wasn't too far different as far as time is concerned, but obviously the direction of things went different.
Yeah.
I felt people thought normally. It was a light scan. I didn't feel like anything was crazy. I didn't dig deep into the politics of that specific world, but
Hmm.
I don't think it was in the future or the past. I think it was around the same time, but just a different type of reality. Something different happened. Like Rick shared a story about him being in another body, and I'll just share one more story. And he was in sales at this company, and he just found himself in a body. Occasionally, when you project, you can find yourself in another version of you. This is, and in this case, he could control himself, kind of like Robert Monroe did in his little steam world. And he was walking around, and he had to pretend like he knew what was going on. And he was like, okay, so he's like, yeah, welcome to new sales guy, and Rick was like, okay, like, can you explain to my payment again? And the guy was like, oh, 200,000 crowns. And over the conversation, Rick discovered that this place, he saw a painting of King Charles. Apparently, England had taken over everything, and I think there was no civil war. I'm not sure what happened, but it was a reality where the King of England was like the king of everything, the United States and everything. Um, so that was interesting. But I'll share one more story.
Yeah,
One more
I
story.
remember that story. I remember also he told a story. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was something where like a bomb wasn't dropped when no, in this life that we live right now, the bomb was never dropped. I'm so bad with the history of it,
Russia.
but yeah,
It
yeah, and
it,
then
it was the nuclear board because he got a false reading that he should have interpreted as a nuclear attack from the United States, but didn't. And I think in the reality, Rick went in, he did press that button, and it
yeah,
was like a
eh,
nuclear war. It was terrible.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So one last story. I remember I left my body, and I can't remember what happened. I think I left my body, and then I just woke up, and I was in another body. In this body, I was taller, I was stronger, um, my skin was lighter, and I was in this apartment, this modern apartment, and I then projected from that body. It was very odd.
Whoa,
I think I felt like I caught a moment where this version of me was about to project, and I kind of went in and kind of something happened. So
whoa!
I remember
I didn't
being in
even
this
know that was
apartment.
possible.
Yeah, it was very, I didn't know either. It was very weird. This version of me just knew how to do it. And so I remember I was laying down on the bed, and it was like a studio. To my to the right of the bed was the kitchen. It was a modern looking kitchen, nothing crazy. And I remember flying around, and I remember trying to move to the front door, and I couldn't move through it. I was just too excited, so I slowly passed through. And then I found myself floating above some buildings, kind of like the New York City brownstones. I was floating, and I see trees in a street. I hear people and I feel people, but I don't see them. I know that there's some kids playing around. It's just regular life. I like those times when I'm just observing people, reliving their life. It's interesting. So I'm flying around in this new body and this different body, and I'm flying around, and I remember flying over the city, and I see these gigantic. They look like Super Bowl trophies. They stored water though, and they're
Hmm.
white, gigantic. And the city was relatively futuristic. And I looked in the distance, there's just beautiful mountains. It was like autumn. The weather was perfect. There was little to no humidity. It was really, really, really nice. And then I like woke up. And that's the only time I think I've ever projected into another body and then projected from that body. Um,
Hmm.
and projection is just weird. Consciousness is very odd because it's so flexible. Like it knows no boundaries. And the more boundaries you remove, the more you experience. You can go and do all sorts of different things and experience different sorts of realities and make new friends that are different species and stuff like that. So,
That makes sense.
yep, yep,
Whew,
yep.
that's awesome, man. Yeah, well, you have a gift, obviously. I'm super happy for you, Joseph, and the adventures that you've been on and that you will go on.
Yeah, man, I'm very grateful because I know that most people that have out of body experiences, it's almost always a near death experience. And because of the way the mechanisms of death work, these experiences can be positive or negative. Because I think that when you die, you see what makes the most sense to you. So,
Yeah.
and Rick has actually done this. You die, if you're a Christian, you might see Jesus, but it's probably a guide being him and explaining the nature of reality. Because you gotta have a land, gotta be. It's an ease process. They gotta ease you in over time because it's hard to you die and then you're alive and then it's you gotta to be told, hey, you might have to live more lives and to then you gotta plan. It's a lot going on.
So, so really quick though, man, I gotta just shoot this in there really quick because it's a thought I had.
Yeah.
Belief. I just feel like the power of belief is just so incredibly powerful. Um, in what you said, I related to, and I felt the same about what you expect to see is what you will see.
Hmm.
But then and then in my a thought that came up to me about how it works is maybe whatever you wholeheartedly believe in, you will manifest that, and that will be the next experience you have after this. But then as you went on just a second ago, you made it sound maybe that's not the case. Maybe it's more objective, and there is a system, there
It
is a
seems,
system, and
yeah,
people will kind of, like you said, the guide will
yeah.
disguise himself.
So every person has a guide because these entities have dedicated their lives to serving people and foregoing their own personal development. The guides are always with you. They're always around you. Now, they don't impede in your free will. They're very picky about when they come in. But I think from what I understand, here and there, they'll try and push you a certain way or say a certain thing, but they're always there. It's just this, I don't know, but it seems like we have a reincarnational system. I don't know what other species have. It's so complicated. But I do think that when you die initially, again, in my opinion, just again, consciousness creates. You're going to create your own reality once you die. Now, it doesn't stay like that. Again, you decide. You always decide what it is.
Hmm.
So, you might find people stuck after death because they're attached. Now, attachment could be attachment to a loved one. It could be attachment to a desire, a drug, whatever, but you keep yourself stuck. If you find yourself in, I don't know, the hell-like dimension because you did all kind of crazy stuff, you put yourself there because
Yeah.
you believe that you need to be there. So, but yeah, guides will take the form of a form that makes the most sense to you, and then from there ease you into what's actually going on. Like, hey, like you are a greater part of a whole. I don't know the whole process though, because I think you have to die to really be there to like experience all of it. But
Yeah.
yeah, belief is powerful. I think your beliefs shape everything about your life, every single thing. And if you change your belief, your life changes.
Yeah.
If you change what you believe about certain things, that thing will change because that's your belief is what guides everything. And
Yeah.
so it guides when you project, it guides when you die, or whatever. And so yeah, belief is extremely powerful, which is why religion is so interesting to me because what you believe, it shapes everything. But
Yeah.
I think unfortunately there's a lot of rigidity because I think like I said, consciousness is always flowing and open and free, and that's what it wants to be. And I think you come in contact, you rub yourself the wrong way, and you do a disservice to yourself when you place barriers on your own
Yeah.
creativity. So anyway,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. Well, cool, Joseph, man. Well, man, you spent a long time with me, and I appreciate you. I
no
owe
problem,
you. I owe you for sure, man. If there's
no
anything I
problem,
can do for you, I don't know whatever that is, but if there is, let me know, and I'll do my best to make it happen.
no problem, man. I enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, yeah, me too, man. Me too. So fascinating, dude. So fascinating.
Yeah, trying my best. I'm trying my best. Yeah. So
Well, keep it up, man. You're gonna rock and roll. You're gonna save so many people, so many
I hope
souls.
so. I
You're
hope
gonna
so.
and whatever it is with your projecting now, it's just whatever it is meant to be, I guess, and you'll be projecting in no time, dude.
Yeah, yeah. I'm getting there, but I feel like I needed this last year and a half to grow in a lot of ways. I
Yeah,
feel much more prepared for more adventures. Because you got to, when it comes to projection, you got to to do certain things, you got to grow into it. You can't just be out here doing anything crazy because it's your development, I think, that has to roll with it as you grow. So,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
excited. I think it's going to be good. So,
Well, cool, man. Is there anything super important you want to say before we get out of here?
no, not right now, man. Not right now. I appreciate the conversation. It was fun.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right, Joseph. Well, cool, man. Have a great rest of your night. I appreciate you.
You too. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
All
you.
right,
Take
bye.
take care.
You too.